Mama, please. They took me. I didn't do it. Those were the words that ripped me from my sleep and sent my heart into chaos. It was past midnight, the kind of hour when bad news doesn't just knock, it breaks down the door. I remember fumbling for the phone, my hands trembling, my voice cracking as I tried to understand what my daughter was saying. Alina was crying so hard I could barely make out the words. All I knew was that she was at the police station. And she was terrified. I didn't even put on proper shoes. I just grabbed my keys, threw on a coat over my nightgown, and ran. The streets were quiet, empty, except for the echo of my heartbeat and the sound of my slippers slapping against the pavement. Every second felt like an hour. What could my daughter have possibly done to end up there? She was the good one, the careful one. The girl who'd spent her childhood reading in corners while the world outside fell apart. But that night, all those memories felt like someone else's dream. When I reached the station, the air inside felt colder than outside. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, too bright, too harsh. Behind the glass window sat my daughter. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara had bled down her cheeks, and she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but her lips quivered instead. I pressed my hand to the glass, but she didn't reach back. That's when fear turned into something darker, something close to dread. An officer approached me with a stiff face and the kind of calm that only comes from routine. "Ma'am," he said, "your daughter's been detained on suspicion of embezzlement." I actually laughed at first, a sharp, bitter sound I didn't recognize as my own. "You've got the wrong person," I said. "She's just a student. She doesn't even have a full-time job." But the man didn't blink. Instead, he laid a brown folder on the desk between us and slowly pushed it toward me. Inside was a photo. Alina, sitting in what looked like a warehouse office, holding a leather bag stuffed with cash, her face frozen, caught mid-smile. The kind of smile you give when you think no one's watching. My mouth went dry. I wanted to deny it, to say it was photoshopped or fake, but the officer's tone didn't allow room for hope. "We have evidence she was involved in a transfer scam linked to her fiancé's company," he said. "She'll have to stay until we sort this out." I turned to Alina again. "What are they talking about? Tell me you didn't—" But she shook her head violently, sobbing. "I swear, Mama, I didn't do this. You have to believe me." And I did. I believed her because I had to. Because if I didn't, then my whole world, the years of sacrifice, of raising her alone, of believing I'd done something right, would mean nothing. Still, something about the officer's tone gnawed at me. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "She's not the only suspect," he said quietly. "You might want to call her stepfather." My stomach turned to stone. Her stepfather. The man who used to be my husband. The man who'd left me for his secretary, Sandra. I stepped outside to make the call, my fingers shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. He didn't answer, but she did. Sandra. Her voice was smooth, measured, like someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Oh, it's you," she said almost sweetly. "He's asleep. What is it this time?" I tried to keep my tone steady. "Sandra, please. It's about Alina. She's been arrested. They're accusing her of something she didn't do." There was a pause. Then a soft laugh. Maybe she finally got what she deserved. Her words sliced through me like glass. "What did you just say?" I asked, my throat tight. "You always acted like she was some perfect angel," Sandra replied. "Maybe now you'll see the truth." Then she hung up. I stood there in the parking lot, under the flickering streetlight, frozen. The wind was cold, but it was nothing compared to the chill crawling up my spine. What did she mean by the truth? Did she know something I didn't? Or was this just another one of her cruel games? I'd always suspected Sandra of trying to turn my ex-husband against our daughter. But this felt deeper, more deliberate. I went back inside, trying to hold myself together for Alina's sake. She wouldn't look me in the eyes anymore. Every time I mentioned her stepfather, she flinched, just slightly, but enough for a mother to notice. "Alina," I whispered, "tell me the truth. Did he have anything to do with this?" She bit her lip until it bled and shook her head. But I knew that look. It was the same look she used to have when she broke something as a child and tried to hide it. fear, shame, protection. Before I could press further, one of the officers returned with a USB stick. "We found security footage from the warehouse," he said. "You might want to see this." The screen flickered to life, showing my daughter entering the office, placing the bag of cash on the desk, and looking around nervously. Then, another figure stepped into the frame. The face was blurred at first, but as the camera angle shifted, my breath caught in my throat. I felt my knees weaken, my hand gripping the back of the chair to stay upright. My voice barely escaped me when I asked, Who is that?" The officer didn't answer. He just turned the monitor toward me fully. The video paused at a perfect, devastating frame. The person standing behind my daughter was someone I knew, someone I trusted once, someone who had every reason to destroy both of us. And when I saw who was standing in that CCTV frame, my knees gave out. Before that night, before the police station, before the photo that broke my world in half, there was just us. Me and my daughter, Alina. I used to believe that as long as we had each other, nothing could touch us. I worked long hours, sometimes double shifts at the diner, sometimes cleaning offices after hours, just to make sure she never felt the kind of emptiness I did after her father left. There were nights I'd come home so exhausted that I'd fall asleep sitting up at the kitchen table. But the sight of her studying by the lamplight kept me going. Her laughter, her small victories, her dreams, they were my oxygen. I didn't have a husband. I didn't have a family name that meant anything. But I had her. And for a long time, that was enough. When her father, Richard, walked out on us for his secretary, Sandra, I told myself I wouldn't break. But you don't realize how much you've shattered until you see the pieces years later, reflected in your child's eyes. I remember the day Alina came home from school crying. She'd overheard someone whisper, her dad left for another woman. She was 12. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that we'd build our own family from the ground up. And we did. We survived birthdays without him, Christmases without phone calls, and those long nights when she'd ask, why didn't he want us? I never had the answer. When Alina turned 18 and got her scholarship to university, I felt like I'd finally done something right. I sold my mother's old jewelry to buy her a small car, a used silver sedan with too many miles on it. But to her, it was freedom. She hugged me so tightly that day, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Mama." And she did. Every phone call, every message, every time she came home with stories of her classes, it was like a piece of my broken heart was healing, but life has a cruel way of waiting for your guard to drop before it strikes again. She met Ethan during her second year. She told me about him one evening while we were having tea. Her eyes sparkled in that way only young love can make them. "He's kind, Mama, gentle. He understands me." I wanted to be happy for her. I truly did. But the moment she said his last name, Morris, something in me froze. "Ethan Morris?" I asked quietly. "As in Sandra Morris?" She looked confused. "You know her?" she asked. I swallowed hard. I used to. Ethan was Sandra's stepson, the son of the woman who had destroyed my marriage, the son who had grown up in the house that used to be mine. I told myself it was just coincidence, that maybe the past didn't have to repeat itself. I didn't want to poison her happiness with my pain. Maybe, I thought, this was life's twisted way of healing old wounds. But even as I smiled at her across the table, something deep inside whispered, "Don't trust it." Still, I let her go. I let her date him. I met him once, a polite, handsome young man with an easy smile and expensive shoes. He called me ma'am and brought flowers. "I'll take care of her," he said, looking straight into my eyes. His tone was respectful, his posture perfect, but there was something too smooth about it, something rehearsed. When he left, I found myself gripping the armrest of my chair, my nails digging into the wood. I didn't know why, but I felt cold all over. Months passed, and their relationship grew serious. He introduced her to his family, even to Sandra. When I found out, I felt sick. "You met her?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alina smiled faintly, as if it were no big deal. "Mama, please don't start. She's actually been very nice. She even said she admired how strong you were." That sentence hit me like a slap. Admired me? The woman who laughed in my face when I begged her not to destroy my marriage. The woman who sent my daughter home crying when she was a child? No. People like Sandra didn't change. They just learned to smile better while they lied. But I stayed quiet. Because Alina was happy, and I couldn't bear to be the reason she wasn't. Everything changed the night the police showed me that photo. The one where she was holding the bag of cash. I couldn't make sense of it. The officer said it came from Ethan's company, that the funds were missing, and that my daughter was now the prime suspect. But Ethan? He was gone, vanished. No contact, no explanation. Just disappeared. I went to Sandra's house the next morning. I still remember the sound of my own knuckles pounding against her perfect white door. She opened it dressed like always. Flawless, composed. That same little smirk she used to wear when she thought she'd won. Well, well, she said. If it isn't the ghost of Christmas past. I didn't bother with small talk. Sandra, where's Ethan? I demanded. Her expression didn't flicker. Oh, Ethan, he's traveling. Business. Don't lie to me, I snapped. He disappeared the same night my daughter was arrested. You know something? She smiled sweetly, tilting her head. Maybe you should have raised her better, she said softly. And then she closed the door. I stood there for a long time, staring at the brass handle, shaking. The shame, the fury, the helplessness, it all came flooding back. I wanted to break that door down. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was stand there, gripping my bag until my fingers went numb. That night, I sat on Alina's bed and cried. The room still smelled like her perfume, her notebook scattered across the desk. I kept thinking about what Sandra said. Maybe you should have raised her better. What if she was right? What if I'd failed my daughter somehow? That's when I noticed it. A folded piece of paper sticking out of Alina's purse. I pulled it out and unfolded it slowly. It was a bank receipt. My name was printed at the top. The account number wasn't one I recognized, but the deposit amount made my head spin. $50,000. I'd never seen that kind of money in my life. I went to the bank the next morning, barely able to breathe. The clerk behind the counter looked confused when I handed him the paper. This account is under your name, he said cautiously. But it's been active for years. For years? I whispered. That's not possible. He hesitated, then leaned closer. Ma'am, I shouldn't say this, but there have been regular deposits from a company called Morris Holdings. It felt like the world tilted beneath me. My daughter's boyfriend's family, Sandra's empire. My name on their account. I stumbled out of the bank, clutching the receipt like a confession. When I got home, I called Alina's lawyer. He was polite but distant. Mrs. Hayes, he said, these financial links make your daughter's case complicated. You might want to get your own representation. My own, I repeated. What are you saying? He cleared his throat. I'm saying you could be implicated if we're not careful. I dropped the phone. Literally dropped it. I sat on the floor, the sound of his words ringing in my ears. Implicated. How could my name even be tied to this? That evening, Alina called me from custody, her voice raw. Mama, did you go to the bank? She asked. I could hear fear in her tone. Yes, I said. Why is my name? But before I could finish, she whispered, Don't look into it, Mama. Please, just trust me. Those words chilled me more than anything else, because that's exactly what I'd told her father once, before everything fell apart. Trust me, and I did, until the day I learned that trust can be the sharpest knife of all. What would you do if your own child was accused of a crime you didn't understand? Would you fight for them? Or would you start to wonder if you ever really knew them at all? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. Sandra's smug smile, Ethan's vanishing act, Alina's trembling voice. It didn't add up. I knew my daughter. I raised her. She wasn't capable of this. But the evidence was starting to whisper otherwise. As I sat there in the darkness, I looked down at that receipt again. My name printed neatly across the top, a date circled in red ink, a deposit from the company that destroyed my marriage. And right then, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone wanted me in this, and then I discovered the first shocking receipt that proved it all. I didn't mean to, Mom. I swear! Those were the first words that broke her silence. Alina sat on her bed, eyes swollen, fingers trembling as she clutched the corner of a pillow like a lifeline. I had spent the entire morning tracing the bank deposits, month after month, year after year. Money pouring into an account with my name on it, but not my signature. The numbers blurred before my eyes. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was terrified. Terrified that someone had been using my identity, and that my own daughter was somehow caught in the middle. I remember opening the file printouts, my voice barely steady. Do you see this, Alina? These transfers, every single one, came from a company owned by Sandra's husband. Her eyes flickered with confusion, then dread. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. Ethan handled all that. He said it was for charity. He told me to sign because it looked better if I was the public face. Her voice cracked on the last word. Public face. My stomach twisted. I knew that phrase. That's what Sandra used to call me. The naive wife who believed everything she was told. But what happened next left me speechless. When I looked through the documents again, the signatures didn't just look similar to mine. They were mine. My handwriting, my loops, my exact slant. Someone had scanned my old documents. I felt sick. It was like watching a ghost version of myself commit crimes I never knew existed. I turned to Alina, my voice breaking. Did Ethan ever have access to my files? My ID? She hesitated. That pause was all I needed. Once, she admitted quietly. He borrowed our home printer. Said he needed to scan something for work. It was such a small moment, one I barely remembered. But in that instant, everything fell apart. I had let that man into my home, fed him dinner, trusted him with my daughter's heart. And he'd used that access to destroy us both. The next day, I went to his office building, clutching the bank records like a weapon. The glass doors reflected my trembling face, but inside, the front desk was empty, lights dimmed, nameplate gone. I asked the janitor if Ethan was around. He shook his head and said softly, "He cleared out last night. Said he was leaving for good." My throat tightened. "Did he say where he was going?" The man looked at me with pity. "Somewhere overseas. Said he was tired of people asking questions. That's when fear turned into rage. I called every number I had. His phone, his company, even Sandra's. No one answered. When I finally drove to their mansion, Sandra herself opened the door. She looked radiant, as if she'd just come from a spa. That cold, perfect smile never wavered. "Well," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "If it isn't my husband's first charity case, how's the investigation going?" I wanted to slap her. Instead, I forced my voice to stay calm. "You know exactly what's happening, Sandra. You set her up, you and your son." Her eyes glinted. "My stepson," she corrected sharply. "And please, don't act like this is about family. This is about consequences. Maybe if you'd taught your daughter better judgment, she wouldn't be signing things she doesn't understand." That sentence cut deeper than anything. I stood there, frozen, realizing she was enjoying every second of this. She leaned closer, perfume heavy and sweet. "You always played the victim, didn't you? Maybe now you'll finally learn how the real world works." I left before I could break. But as I turned to my car, something caught my eye. Her husband's car wasn't in the driveway. He'd been at every business trip, every public event, yet now, he was nowhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was running from something too. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. The house felt too quiet, too hollow. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message. Just 6 words. "Stop digging, or you'll lose her too." I froze. The number was unknown. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. I wanted to call the police, but how could I? They already thought my daughter was guilty. I couldn't risk them thinking I was paranoid too. The next morning, a knock startled me. It was our neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Collins. He held out a small flash drive. "This fell outside your gate last night. I think it's your daughter's." I didn't even wait to sit down. I plugged it in immediately. Folders popped up, images, documents, timestamps. My hand flew to my mouth as I scrolled through them. Pictures of Sandra, of Ethan, and a man I didn't recognize carrying a suitcase. They were in a parking garage. Sandra was smiling, handing him something. In the next photo, the man handed her the suitcase. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. I clicked another image. Alina standing several feet away, half hidden behind a car. Her phone aimed toward them. She had taken those pictures. She had seen everything. That's why she was targeted. She wasn't part of it. She was witness to it. I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking. I needed answers, and I needed them now. But when I reached out to a lawyer that afternoon, he refused to take my case. "I'm sorry," he said, glancing nervously at his phone. "Someone higher up told me not to get involved." I felt the air leave my lungs. Higher up? What does that even mean? He looked at me with something close to fear. "It means this isn't just about money. It's about power. And if you value your daughter's life, stop chasing it." I left his office trembling. Outside, the city looked different, colder, sharper. Every stranger's face seemed like a mask. Every sound made me turn around. That's what fear does. It rewrites the world around you until you can't tell who's friend or foe. When I got home that night, my headlights swept across the driveway. That's when I saw it. A car parked across the street. Engine running, lights off. My stomach dropped. I knew that car. Sandra's silver sedan. I stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for her to move, to step out, to do something. But she never did. Eventually, the engine turned off, and the silence that followed was worse than any confrontation. I closed every curtain in the house. I locked the doors twice, but even then I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the flash drive. Each photo replayed in my mind, like scenes from a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next morning, I decided to search Ethan's old office myself. It wasn't hard to break in. The landlord hadn't even changed the locks. The space was stripped bare, just dust and echoes. But as I rifled through the drawers, I found something he'd missed. A single folder, tucked behind a loose panel. Inside were documents, contracts, bank transfers, offshore accounts. And then, one paper that made my blood run cold. My name was printed at the top. Beneath it, Ethan's signature. But the title of the document was what shattered me completely. Power of attorney. He had legally given himself control over my assets, using forged signatures and false witnesses. Every deposit, every account, every stolen cent, it was all done under my name. I dropped the paper, my hands shaking so violently it slipped to the floor. I sank to my knees, whispering to myself, "Oh God, what have they done to us?" Because in that moment, I realized something far worse than theft or fraud. They hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen my identity, my credibility, and my child's freedom. And as I stared at that document, one thought wouldn't leave my mind. If Ethan had this much control, then maybe Sandra wasn't just standing behind him. Maybe she was the one pulling every string. But nothing prepared me for the document I found in his drawer. The one that would change everything I thought I knew about who the real criminal was. The day I decided to hire an investigator, something inside me shifted. I wasn't the same woman who once begged at police desks or cried into her pillow at night. I was done being afraid. I was done waiting for justice to show up on its own. I wanted answers, and I was willing to pay for the truth. The man I found, Mr. D'Souza, was quiet but sharp, the kind of person who saw details most people missed. He listened as I poured out everything. The forged accounts, the stolen signatures, the threats, even the car that sat outside my home for nights on end. When I was done, he just nodded and said, "If they left fingerprints on your life, I'll find them." It took him less than 2 weeks. When he handed me the file, my hands shook before I even opened it. Dozens of pages, stamped, signed, sealed, everyone linking me to shell companies I never even knew existed. My name appeared on corporate papers filed under Sandra's husband's firm. My supposed authorization was dated years before my daughter's arrest. My stomach turned as I realized what it meant. The trail didn't just start with Alina's photo. It started long before that. They had been building this trap for years. D'Souza looked grim. "This isn't random, ma'am. They've used your identity as a shield. Every transaction under your name protected someone higher up." I already knew who. Sandra. The next evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The file spread out like a graveyard of my own name. The phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered without thinking. Her voice was like honey poured over glass, sweet, cutting. "You've been busy, haven't you?" "Sandra," I breathed, gripping the phone tighter. She laughed softly, almost indulgently. "You should have stayed in your lane, dear. This is business. You think a few papers will scare people like us? You don't even understand how small you are in this game. I pressed record on my second phone, sliding it beside me on the table. My voice was steady when I said, "You framed my daughter. You ruined her future." "Your daughter?" she said mockingly. "Oh, please." She signed the documents. She played her part. If you didn't teach her the difference between love and leverage, that's hardly my fault. There was something chilling about how calm she was, how entertained. Before I could reply, she added, "You want to fight? Go ahead. But I promise you, when this is over, you won't just lose your daughter. You'll lose your name, your reputation, and everything you think you own." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, the recording still running. That laugh, that arrogance, something in me hardened. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I walked into the police station with D'Souza's file and the recorded call. I expected justice. Instead, I met the inspector's tired eyes. He closed the folder after a few pages, sighed, and leaned back. "Look," he said carefully, "this isn't the kind of case we can handle easily. You're accusing very powerful people." "I'm not accusing," I shot back. "I'm giving you proof." He rubbed his forehead, lowering his voice. "Sandra's husband funds half this department's equipment. If I move forward without clearance, I'll lose my job. Maybe worse." That's when I realized this wasn't just corruption. It was control. They didn't just own businesses. They owned fear itself. But I refused to be silenced. When the system is bought, you take your truth somewhere they can't control. I went to the media. I sent everything. The audio, the bank trails, even photos of the forged documents. By nightfall, it was everywhere. My face, my voice, my story. News anchors dissected it like a thriller. Mother accuses wealthy socialite family of elaborate fraud and cover-up. Comment sections flooded with sympathy, outrage, curiosity. For a moment, it felt like justice was finally tilting in my favor. But power doesn't break that easily. The very next morning, a thick envelope arrived at my door. A lawsuit. Defamation. They were suing me for everything I had left. In court, Sandra looked untouchable. Pearls at her neck. Hands folded gracefully, as if she were attending a luncheon, not a trial. Her lawyer spoke with a polished venom. "This woman is using grief as performance. There is no evidence, only bitterness." Every word felt like a slap. When it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked but didn't falter. "They took everything from me," I said. "They stole my name, my child's future, and then dared to call it business." The judge listened silently, expression unreadable. For days, the courtroom felt like a stage where truth was twisted and mocked. One by one, my witnesses started backing out. One of them, a former employee from the real estate firm, sent me a message the night before he was due to testify. "I can't do this. They found my wife's address." Another cliff edge. Every time I climbed, they cut the rope. Then Ethan's lawyer approached mine during recess, his tone icy. "Tell your client to stop pretending to be a saint. We have personal videos, private moments between her daughter and Ethan. If she keeps pushing, we'll make them public." I felt the world tilt. I rushed to Alina that night. "Tell me the truth," I begged. "Did you ever record anything with him?" Tears filled her eyes. "Mom, no. I would never." Then she froze. "Wait. He once asked me to check the phone camera settings." I didn't think. She didn't need to finish. I understood. Ethan had filmed her, without consent. It wasn't just fraud, it was exploitation. I wanted to scream, to burn the whole system down, but rage wouldn't save her. Truth would. That's when my lawyer, Ms. Patel, found something. A detail buried deep in one of the contracts Sandra's husband had drafted years ago. A clause, tiny but deadly. It transferred full liability for the shell companies to the operational executor of record. That executor was Ethan. It meant that if I could prove the companies were active under his management, not mine, the entire fraud would fall on him, not me, not Alina. Patel leaned across the table, whispering, "They buried this clause thinking no one would ever read the fine print. If we can verify the dates of his digital logins, we win." I remember exhaling for what felt like the first time in months. Finally, a crack in their armor. But the night before the final hearing, something happened. D'Souza, my investigator, went missing. His phone was disconnected, his office cleared. The file backups he kept were gone. I sat there staring at his empty chair, realizing the risk he had taken for me. I didn't sleep that night. I held Alina's hand, whispering to her, "No matter what happens tomorrow, I will not let them destroy you." The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. The air felt heavy, electric. Sandra sat there, radiant as ever, her pearl necklace gleaming under the lights. Ethan wasn't there. His seat was empty. Her lawyer shuffled nervously, whispering into his phone. Then the judge entered. Everyone stood. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might give out. When the bailiff called my name, I rose slowly, my palms damp, and in that moment, the entire room froze. I swear to you, Your Honor, every single document was forged. My voice trembled, but I didn't look away. The courtroom was so silent I could hear the echo of my own heartbeat. Sandra sat across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap, pearls glistening under the harsh lights as if she were attending a gala. Not her own downfall. She didn't flinch, not even when my lawyer placed the sealed envelope on the table, the one that contained the recording. I had listened to it 100 times alone in the dark, every word like a blade twisting deeper into my chest. But this time, it wasn't just my secret to bear anymore. It was about to become hers too. When the judge gave a curt nod, my lawyer pressed play, and then her voice filled the courtroom. "You should have stayed in your lane, dear. This is business." The sound of Sandra's laughter, cold, confident, unbothered, sent a visible chill through the room. People turned toward her, whispers spreading. Like wildfire, I saw her composure falter for the first time. A flicker in her eyes, a tremor at the edge of her smile. For years she had controlled the narrative, painting herself as the elegant matriarch, the benevolent protector. But now, her own words were the rope tightening around her neck. The judge leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Mrs. Whitmore, is this your voice?" Sandra gave a delicate shrug, as if amused. Anyone can fake a recording these days. But even her confidence cracked when my lawyer produced the forensic report verifying the file's authenticity. The crowd gasped. Cameras clicked. I saw a young reporter scribbling notes furiously, her eyes wide with disbelief. And in that moment, I realized something. Truth has a sound of its own. You can't fake it, no matter how much money or power you have. Then came the financial transfers, one after another, projected onto the courtroom screen. My name appeared on those files, forged signatures linking me to fraud. But now, line by line, the investigator's report revealed the routing trail to Sandra's husband's offshore accounts. Millions quietly siphoned away, protected under layers of shell companies. The judge's gavel struck once, the sound echoing like thunder. "This is no longer a civil matter," he said. "This is criminal." And then everything broke. Ethan turned pale. His suit looked suddenly too big for him, like a child playing dress-up. "You said they'd never find out," he snapped at his mother. His voice cracked, desperate. "You said it was handled." For a moment I almost pitied him, almost. He had been her puppet, her shield. But now, even he could see that the woman he called mother had built her empire on lies and betrayal. Sandra turned slowly toward him, her calm gone. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You wouldn't have a company, a name, or even a life without me." Ethan stood up, his hands shaking. "Then maybe I don't want your life anymore." The audience gasped. The judge called for order, but no one moved. It was like watching an empire collapse from within, brick by brick, mother against son. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Sandra, in a fit of rage, lunged at him. Yes, right there in court. She actually tried to grab his arm, hissing through clenched teeth. "You ungrateful boy. You'll destroy us all." Officers rushed to pull her back, but she struggled, eyes wild, hair disheveled, the perfect mask finally shattered. For the first time, the world saw the real Sandra Whitmore, the woman behind the silk and pearls, desperate and cornered. In the chaos, her lawyer tried to object, stammering something about emotional distress, but the judge silenced him with one sharp glare. "Enough. Mrs. Whitmore, you will remain seated." Yet even as they restrained her, she smirked at me. "You think you've won?" she whispered. "You don't know what real power looks like." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The evidence was louder than her threats ever could be. Moments later, The courtroom doors burst open. A detective entered, whispering something urgent to the bailiff. The judge paused, then nodded grimly. "Proceed." And that's when they announced it. A police raid had just been executed at the Whitmore estate. Computers seized, hidden ledgers uncovered, offshore connections confirmed. It turned out Ethan's outburst, his desperate confession, had triggered everything. He'd told the investigators enough to act. Sandra's empire was collapsing in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I felt tears streaming down my face before I even realized I was crying. Cameras flashed as the media captured it all. My trembling hands, my tear-streaked cheeks. But those weren't tears of weakness. They were the release of years of fear, of shame, of being silenced. The same officer who had dismissed me months ago now turned to me and said quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We should have listened sooner." I couldn't even respond. My voice had abandoned me. When the gavel came down again, the judge's voice was final. "Sandra Whitmore and Ethan Whitmore are hereby remanded into custody pending trial." Gasps filled the air. Ethan buried his face in his hands. Sandra stood frozen, the realization settling in like a poison. Her husband's influence couldn't save her this time. Not from the truth. As they were led away in handcuffs, Sandra twisted around, locking eyes with me. And then, with a chilling calm, she said it. "You'll regret this, Miriam. You always do." Her words were soft, but they cut deeper than any scream could, because part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. People like her, people who believe power is their birthright, don't just vanish. They find ways to haunt you, even in absence. Still, when the courtroom doors closed behind her, the air shifted. It felt lighter. My daughter Alina ran into my arms, sobbing. "It's over, Mom," she whispered against my shoulder. But I couldn't speak. I just held her. The warmth of her body grounding me back to life. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not because justice had been served, but because I had faced everything they tried to bury me with. And I was still standing. Outside the courthouse, microphones and flashing lights surrounded us. I heard reporters shouting my name, asking how it felt to take down the Whitmore dynasty. But all I could do was smile faintly and whisper, mostly to myself. It was never about revenge. It was about the truth. And yet, even as the cameras faded and the sun dipped low behind the courthouse steps, Sandra's final words echoed in my mind like a warning. "You'll regret this." I don't know if she meant it as a threat or a prophecy, but I do know this. Sometimes when justice finally arrives, it doesn't come with peace. It comes with silence. And in that silence, I realized I was finally free. I still remember the day they called. It was raining, heavy and loud, the kind of rain that blurs everything you thought you knew. I was standing by the kitchen window, holding a chipped mug of coffee when the phone rang. For a moment I froze. Even months later, the sound of that phone still made my chest tighten. But when I picked up, the voice on the other end was trembling with relief. "Mrs. Hayes, Alina's been cleared. All charges dropped." I didn't say anything at first. My knees just gave out beneath me. I sat on the floor, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline. Because for so long, it had only brought pain. Calls from lawyers, police, reporters. But this one was different. Alina walked in, hair damp from her morning walk, and saw me crying. "Mom?" she whispered, afraid to ask. I nodded through tears. "It's over, baby. It's finally over. We didn't celebrate. We didn't even speak for a while. We just held each other, the silence between us saying everything words couldn't. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt her body relax against mine. My little girl, who had faced public humiliation, handcuffs, courtrooms, was free. And for the first time, I could breathe without guilt pressing on my ribs. But freedom doesn't come clean. It comes with residue, memories that cling to you like smoke. Even after Sandra's arrest, the whispers followed us. In grocery stores, in church pews, in the echo of passing conversations. That's her. That's the woman from the case. We could feel eyes on us everywhere, as if people didn't know whether to pity or praise us. That's when I realized. Some battles don't end when the judge drops the gavel. They end when you decide you won't live inside their judgment anymore. So we packed up our lives, sold the house, boxed the memories that still hurt too much to touch. We moved 3 towns over, small enough that nobody knew our story, quiet enough that the nights didn't hum with gossip. I remember standing in the doorway of our new apartment, paint still smelling fresh, light streaming through the windows, and thinking, maybe this is what starting over really feels like. Alina started volunteering first. A women's legal aid center downtown, helping victims of financial abuse, teaching them how to read contracts, how to protect themselves from the kind of manipulation that once destroyed us. Sometimes I'd find her hunched over a desk at midnight, reading case files by lamplight. "Mom," she'd say softly, "if one woman walks away stronger because of what I went through, then it's worth it." I used to think justice was about punishment, but watching her I learned it's about prevention. It's about breaking the pattern before it starts again. As for me, I went back to the courthouse, not as a plaintiff this time, but as a volunteer. I sat with women who couldn't afford lawyers, who didn't know what words to use in rooms where power spoke its own language. I saw myself in every one of them, the shaking hands, the eyes full of disbelief. I'd hold their forms, their stories, and whisper, "You're not crazy. You're not alone." Because that's what Sandra made me believe once, that my pain was an exaggeration, that my truth was too inconvenient to exist. But even in our peace, the shadows lingered. Every few weeks I'd get an envelope. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Inside, typed words. Sometimes only a sentence. "You think it's over?" Another read, "They don't stay behind bars forever." The first few times I panicked. I even called the police once. But they told me what I already knew. Without proof, there was nothing they could do. So I stopped reporting and started burning them instead. Watching the paper curl and turn to ash became its own kind of ritual. Still, late at night, when the house was quiet and the clock ticked too loud, I'd wonder, was it Sandra? Someone connected to her? Or just a ghost of paranoia refusing to leave me? Sometimes I'd hear a car slow down outside, or a knock that came a little too softly, and I'd freeze. Because trauma doesn't vanish, it waits, patient and familiar. But one morning changed everything. Alina and I were sitting on the porch, sunlight stretching across the grass, birds chattering like they'd been waiting for spring. She looked up from her coffee and said, "Mom, do you ever think about forgiveness?" I laughed, quiet, bitter. "Every day," I admitted. "But it doesn't come easy." She nodded. "Would you ever forgive them?" I looked at her for a long time. Her face was calm, not angry like before. There was something peaceful in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "Maybe someday," I said softly. "But not today. Tell me something. If you were in my place, could you forgive the people who framed your child? Could you let go of years stolen, names dragged through mud, nights spent crying into a pillow so your daughter wouldn't hear? People love to talk about forgiveness as if it's a gift you owe the ones who hurt you. But I've learned something else. It's not about them. It's about you deciding that the past doesn't get to hold your future hostage anymore. Sandra's family lost everything. Their mansion was auctioned off, their cars repossessed, their charity shut down after the investigation. Last I heard, her husband filed for divorce from prison. The world that once bowed to their name now crossed the street to avoid it. There was a strange kind of poetry in that. The empire built on deceit had finally turned to dust, and yet I don't celebrate it. Because every fall, every downfall, comes with collateral damage. People lost jobs. Families broke apart. The truth came at a cost. And even though justice was served, it left scars on everyone who touched it. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't destroy families. Secrets do. These days, our life is simple. I wake up before sunrise, make tea, sit by the window, and watch the city slowly come alive. Some mornings I volunteer. Others, I garden on the small patch of soil behind our building, planting things that will outlive the pain. I talk to neighbors. I laugh again. Sometimes, I even forget the sound of the courtroom echo. But then, every once in a while, the phone rings late. That sharp tone still sends a jolt through me. My hand hesitates before answering, my heart skipping just once. And then I breathe. Because even if it's bad news, even if it's another echo of the past trying to claw its way back, I remind myself, we survived. The woman I was before, she's gone. She died in that courtroom, the day Sandra's mask cracked. But in her place stands someone stronger, Someone who knows that silence can be a weapon and truth can be a shield. I don't chase peace anymore. I build it, one quiet morning at a time. Sometimes, when I pass by the courthouse steps where it all began, I pause. I see strangers hurrying in and out, some broken, some hopeful, and I smile, just a little. Because I know what it's like to walk into those doors feeling like your life is over, and I know what it's like to walk out realizing it's only just beginning. People often ask me now what I've learned through all of this, through the lies, the trials, the pain. And I tell them, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's walking into the storm anyway. Justice doesn't always come from courts or judges. Sometimes it comes from the quiet decision to stand your ground when no one else believes you. And if you take nothing else from my story, take this. The truth doesn't destroy families. Secrets do, and sometimes justice doesn't come from the courts. It comes from courage.